Heroes of 9/11, page 53. Don't jump, we're coming. Lieutenant Rosario Ross Terranova, Emergency Medical Service. Lieutenant Ross Terranova looked up at the flaming, smoking upper floors of the North Tower and watched death fall from the sky. At first, he thought he was seeing debris tumbling out of the broken windows, but within seconds, he realized that those objects were people. Doomed people who chose to die from a 10-second plunge that would kill them instantly on impact. Intense smoke and heat had pushed them to this last desperate act of their lives. They jumped alone or in pairs, some holding hands. It was almost too much for Terranova to bear. "Don't do it," he screamed at them until he was hoarse. "Don't jump. We're coming." He knew they couldn't hear him, not when they were more than 1,000 feet above him, not when his voice was drowned out by the din of emergency vehicles on the ground and a raging fire on the top floors. "I can't imagine what's going through their minds," he thought. They wouldn't stop jumping. Terranova told himself that although those trapped in the floors above the fire couldn't be saved, thousands more could. As an officer of FDNY's Emergency Medical Services, EMS, he was determined to help ensure that all the injured who made it out were given swift treatment at the scene. Terranova had been in the chief of department's office that morning when he heard Chief Peter Gansey yell, "A plane just hit the World Trade Center." At first, Terranova assumed it was a joke, but when he looked out the window, he saw smoke billowing out of the upper floors of the North Tower, a mile and a half away. The first thing he did was go to the bathroom because he figured he wouldn't get another chance for quite a while. Then he alerted his immediate supervisor, 3-star Chief Jerry Gombo. After grabbing radios and other supplies, the two hopped into a car and, with Terranova driving, sped toward the WTC in a 5-vehicle convoy led by Gansey, the highest-ranking officer in the FDNY. It would be EMS's responsibility to set up medical treatment areas at the scene. Its 2,500 members, including EMTs and paramedics, who are highly skilled EMTs, were used to responding to an average of 3,000 calls for assistance every day. But nothing would compare to what they were about to face. On the short ride to the WTC, neither Terranova nor Gombo said much, but they were both thinking the same thing. It'll be a long and difficult day, the most challenging in the history of the EMS. They split off from the others and parked on Fulton and Church Streets, east of the complex near St. Paul's Chapel. Bolting from the car, they entered a world of chaos. People were running out of the North Tower. A few paramedics and EMTs were already treating dazed victims just east of the building in a makeshift triage area. Emergency vehicles were roaring to the scene from all directions. "It's going to be bad, but we can handle it," Terranova thought. "Everyone will get out safely. The injured will get treated, and the firefighters will knock down the fire." Trained as an EMT, Terranova treated a few victims, including a man whose head was bleeding. But as a lieutenant, Terranova's role was to help organize the department's dozens of arriving EMTs and paramedics so they could do their job effectively. With a trace of reluctance He turned his patients over to an EMT. Surveying the scene, Terranova urged the fleeing office workers to keep moving away from the building. People were asking, "What's happening? What's going on?" He didn't have time to explain. As respectfully as he could, he told them, "Just keep moving north. Get as far away as you can." Some people were so dazed, they stood still, staring straight ahead. Staring straight up. Uh, Keep moving, he ordered. Don't look. In the strange snow of fluttering paper, debris of various sizes kept crashing to the ground. It was obvious to Terranova that the triage area was in a dangerous location. "We're too close to the building," he told the EMTs. "Let's evacuate." As increasing amounts of rubble bombed the spot, he and Gambo helped move patients farther away. Tragically, some people didn't or couldn't move fast enough and were seriously injured or fatally crushed by the falling fragments. A massive piece of burning metal slammed within a few yards of Terranova. They established a safer triage area across Church Street near the chapel. From his vantage point on the east side, Terranova tried to convince himself that the damage to the North Tower didn't look so terrible. But he discovered it was actually worse after he and Gumbo hurried to the west side of the North Tower to coordinate efforts with Gansey. That's when Terranova first saw people leaping to their deaths. Instinctively, he yelled and pleaded for them to stop, but his shouts were in vain. Never had he felt more helpless and more hopeless. If I only had a megaphone. Who am I kidding? They can't hear me. I wish I could do something, but I can't. None of us can. It's a lost cause. They wouldn't stop jumping. Terranova forced himself to focus on those who could be saved. "I have a job to do," he told himself, "so let's go forward with the mission and do the best we can." He and Gumbo went inside the North Tower lobby to the command post, where a plan was put together to establish staging areas to treat and evacuate patients. Terranova figured there would be hundreds, if not thousands, of people needing medical assistance. Because of serious communications problems and radio interference, Gansey moved the command post outside and across West Street near 2 World Financial Center. As the EMS officers were setting up, they heard a low-flying second jetliner zooming in from the south. Seconds later, it tore into the South Tower, causing a violent blast and fireball. At the moment of impact, the stunned EMS group at the new command center felt an instant flash of heat generated from the explosion. Even though it was hundreds of yards away, fiery debris began cascading onto West Street. "My God, we're under attack," Terranova shouted to no one in particular. "What are we going to do now?" he wondered. Then he answered his own question. "Just do our jobs." Meanwhile, the pace of the civilians exiting both towers increased rapidly, but for the most part remained orderly despite a growing sense of disbelief. Less than an hour after the second plane struck, First Deputy Fire Commissioner Bill Feehan approached Terranova at the outdoor EMS command center and asked, "Any idea how many patients we'll be treating?" I don't know, Terranova replied. Many of them are still trapped. He stopped in mid-sentence after hearing Gansey shout, "Oh no!" Spinning on his heels, Terranova looked toward the South Tower. To his utter shock, the building was starting to collapse. Gansey hollered, "Go, go, go!" I don't think I can outrun this, Terranova thought. I've got to find cover. He had a choice: run to the right, as some were already doing, or run to the left. He chose left. Turning to Gombo, he said, "Jerry, let's get to cover." Terranova took about 4 giant strides and looked over his shoulder. Gombo hadn't moved. He seemed transfixed at the unbelievable sight of a 110-story building crumbling to the ground. Terranova ran back, grabbed Gombo by the collar of his shirt, and yanked him to the left. They dashed to the nearby ramp that led down to the loading dock of the nearest building and crouched behind a parked white van. Terranova couldn't help himself. There was still a part of him that just had to see what was happening. So he stood up for a quick glimpse. Wow, the building is going down right before my eyes. It doesn't seem possible. Amid a thunderous rumble that grew into a roar unlike any he had ever heard before, he saw an ominous, billowing cloud churning toward him. He hunkered behind the truck as thousands of pounds of rubble rained onto the ramp in a deafening racket that jangled every fiber of his body. Then came silence and darkness. It was what he imagined death would be like, a sinister stillness wrapped in a creepy gloom. But he knew he wasn't dead. Thank God I'm alive. Realizing he had been holding his breath since the ramp filled with smoldering dust, he inhaled. Pain ripped at his lungs and throat as he was breathing sand. He gasped for air. I can't believe I got away from the collapse and now I'm going to suffocate to death. What a horrible way to go. He pulled his t-shirt over his nose and mouth, hoping it would help breathe. It did, but barely. Every time he took a breath, his mouth filled with soot, powder, and pulverized cement, and it hurt. Although he couldn't see Gumbo, he could feel him moving. Okay, there are at least 2 of us who are still alive. Gumbo always carried a small flashlight in his pocket because he figured there would be unexpected times when he would need one. This was one of those times. He turned it on. To Terranova, who was right next to him, the beam was only slightly visible in the swirling dust. Ross, are you all right? Gumbo asked between coughs. Yeah, I'm hurt. I'm not hurt, just hard to breathe. And you? I'm okay. We should get up and try to find a way out of here. Terranova began feeling jittery because the vehicle they had been hiding behind was a white van with no markings. It was the same kind of truck that terrorists had packed with explosives and blown up in the North Tower's underground parking garage in 1993. We're not in a good spot here, Jerry. As the dust settled, they could see that the entrance to the ramp was blocked by debris. They called out to anyone who might have been trapped in the rubble, but didn't hear any reply. So they headed toward the back of the loading dock, where they met up with several other first responders who had sought safety. They crowded into the booth of the dock supervisor and shoved a towel under the door to keep out the dust. Taking turns using a water cooler, they rinsed gunk out of their mouths, which allowed them to breathe and talk easier. They didn't have any radio communication. Their cell phones and office phone didn't work either. The group found a way out of the building by going through an exit on the west side, which opened onto the marina and World Financial Center Plaza. To Terranova, it seemed like such a different world than it was on the other side of the building. Here, sailboats moored to the docks rocked gently in the water. Large umbrellas shaded the tables and chairs of outdoor cafes. Everything seemed so quiet and peaceful, as though it was 1,000 miles away from the bedlam only a block away. But everything was also coated in a dusty gray. Terranova and Gumbo walked a block north to the Embassy Suites Hotel at the corner of VC Street and North End Avenue. In the lobby, an EMS treatment area had been set up to care for a few injured firefighters and several civilians. The pair headed outside again, walking on VC Street toward the command center, wondering if it would still be there. A snow of gray ash and pieces of paper continued to fall, covering the ground and creating a bizarre winter-like landscape. They encountered some paramedics on the street treating injured civilians. "This isn't safe here," Terranova told them. "You need to move farther away. You don't know what else can happen." "We'll finish up with these patients first, and then we'll evacuate," replied one of the paramedics. Suddenly, Terranova heard an awful, thundering roar. It was the same sound that had accompanied the collapse of the South Tower. He looked up. "Oh my God, now the North Tower is collapsing." As the racket intensified, Terranova began pushing people on the street, shouting, "Move, move, move! The North Tower is falling!" Keeping his eyes on the tumbling skyscraper, Terranova backpedaled furiously while warning everyone to seek shelter. Then he saw a treacherous gray cloud rolling like a killer tidal wave down the street directly toward him. He yelled at everyone he saw, "Follow me!" Then he sprinted toward the embassy suites. He saw that some panicky people were running down the sidewalk rather than ducking into doorways. So he stationed himself at the corner of the building. That way he could step out, grab them, and pull them off to the side before the cloud engulfed them. Braced for the galloping cloud, Terranova pressed himself face first against the building. But no matter how hard he clung, he was no match for the powerful force that was propelling the cloud. As it churned past him, he was pulled away from the building and knocked off his feet. Fortunately, he wasn't hit with any debris. Once again, he had to cover his mouth and nose with his t-shirt to help him breathe. After the dust thinned out, he looked at the spot where he had last seen paramedics treating the injured on the street. Now there was nothing but rubble. "I hope they get out in time," he thought. He and Gumbo returned to the hotel lobby and after a while noticed that most of the EMTs were no longer busy. "Where are all the victims?" Terranova wondered. "There should be hundreds of them. Now it seems like there's nobody left to treat." He had a sinking feeling that the collapse of the two towers had killed most everyone who hadn't escaped. He feared that what was currently a rescue effort for the injured would soon become a recovery effort for the dead. "At least our people and everyone who made it here are in a safe location. Nothing else is likely to fall." He and Gambo were developing a new plan when he noticed police and firefighters running away from the hotel. He rushed outside, grabbed a police officer by the arm, and asked, "What's going on?" "There's a major gas leak in the building." Terranova darted inside and warned everyone to evacuate. He told Gumbo, "We need to move again. It's no longer safe here." Gumbo uh, agreed, saying, "We can't put our people in harm's way. Let's get everyone to move north, and then we'll regroup and figure out our next plan." Because communications were still ineffective, Gumbo decided to establish an EMS command post at police headquarters about 8 blocks east so he could coordinate with other agencies and city services. On the way there, Gumbo said, "The first two calls we'll make are to Rena, Gumbo's wife, and Kristen, Terranova's fiance. Then we're going to get to work." After they arrived, Terranova called Kristen, a music teacher at an elementary school on Long Island, and told her, "I'm okay. I'm not hurt, but I'll be here until late tonight. Be safe and take all the time you need," she told him. He and Gumbo spent the balance of the first day setting up a work schedule on long-term operation. While at the headquarters, Terranova had his first chance to see on TV the stunning images of the destruction of the World Trade Center and the Pentagon and the impact zone where the fourth hijacked plane crashed in Pennsylvania. Only then did he fully understand the magnitude of the terrorist attacks. Like all members of the FDNY, Terranova and Gumbo were in a state of shock as news trickled in of the mounting number of presumed deaths of New York's bravest 100, 200, 300, and counting. How lucky am I? Terranova pondered. I'm wearing a short sleeve uniform shirt and a helmet. No jacket, no safety boots, no protective clothing. I survived the collapse of two buildings, and I don't have a scratch on me. At about 10 p.m., he and Gumbo left for the night to look for their car. On the way, they met Captain Jimmy Yakimovich, a big, burly veteran firefighter. He was slumped over looking like a broken man, his eyes watering. He told Terranova, "They're all dead. Gansey, Feehan, Burns." The devastated captain was referring to three of the top leaders in the FDNY. Chief of Department Peter Gansey, First Deputy Fire Commissioner Bill Feehan, and Assistant Chief Donald Burns. "Yes, Yak, it's a tragedy," Terranova said. He had learned earlier about those deaths, but hearing someone saying it with such sorrow packed a powerful emotional punch. Trudging onward, he and Gumbo found their dust-covered car. It was scratched up, but otherwise intact, except for one broken window. In fact, they noticed that the windows of several parked cars had been smashed. "I think I know why," Terranova told Gumbo. "People who were caught in one of the debris clouds after the collapse probably broke the windows and took gulps of clean air that were in the cars." Terranova went home for a few hours of sleep and then returned to ground zero by 6 a.m., where searchers were painstakingly probing the pile of rubble and exploring voids for any survivors. Later that morning, when none of the hundreds of missing firefighters had been pulled out alive, his hopes began to fade that any would be rescued. The grief only got worse for Terranova while sitting in a temporary command post, studying page after page of a list of first responders who weren't accounted for. His eyes fell on the name of Mike Mullen. Oh God, not him. Mullen, a firefighter from Ladder 12, was a good friend since their high school days. After Mullen had learned in 1985 that Terranova's sister, Marie, who was physically disabled, had a crush on him, he always sent her flowers on her birthday. He never missed a year, even when he was deployed as a captain in the Army Reserves. Marie still keeps a photo of Mullen in her room. It seemed every week over the next 18 months there was another funeral, another memorial that Terranova attended. He would don his dress uniform and go to nearby towns and cities to honor those brave men and women of 9/11, many of whom he didn't know personally. If he never heard another rendition of Amazing Grace, it would be too soon. He, like hundreds of members of the FDNY who were at the scene before the collapse of the two towers, was awarded the World Trade Center Survivor Medal. The gold medal dangles from a purple and black ribbon. Above it is a rectangular citation bar. The left half of the bar shows the number 343 in gold for the number of FDNY members killed, against a purple background. The right half displays two gold stars on a black background. In 2002, at the funeral of a fallen firefighter, Terranova was talking with Daniel Nigro, who had assumed the position chief of department after the death of his close friend Peter Gansey. Because the chief was veteran, because the chief was a highly decorated veteran, he was authorized to wear an impressive number of citations and medals on his dress uniform. But Terranova noticed that Negro was wearing only one, the World Trade Center Survivor Medal. Chief, Terranova asked, why aren't you wearing all your medals? Negro or Nigro pointed to the lone medal and replied, after 9/11, this is the only one that matters. Ross Terranova was promoted to captain in 2003. 3 years later, he was named a deputy chief of the NYFD's EMS command. In the months after 9/11, Terranova tried to ease the heartache of that day by working long hours. I had to work because that was my therapy, he explains. I was working with people who knew what I was going through because they had gone through it too. More importantly, I figured that if I was working for the good of others, maybe it would somehow make up for those I couldn't help on 9/11. He often sees Jerry Gumbo, now Deputy Assistant Chief of EMS Operations. We have a standing date on September 11th, Terranova says. We go together to the annual memorial service and then spend time at Ground Zero and retrace our route. Every time I see him on September 11th, he pulls out his flashlight, waves it, and then puts it away. No words are spoken. None are needed.
What happened on 9/11 has taught Terranova, a father of three, how fickle life can be. Sometimes you have to make a life or death decision in a split second. Like, do you run to the left or to the right? He says. I've always been haunted by the fact that everyone at our command center who went left when the South Tower fell survived. Those who ran right ultimately died. Although First Deputy Fire Commissioner Bill Fian and Chief of Department Peter Gansey escaped from the first collapse, they later perished when the North Tower fell. Had we followed them and gone to the right during the South Tower's collapse, we likely would have stayed with them and would have died when the North Tower came down, Terranova says. He adds that it was his duty to attend as many funerals as he could. If it had been me who had died, others would have stood the line for me. He's referring to the custom of members of the department who stand at attention on one side of the street and face the place of worship during the funeral procession for a fallen comrade. Going to their funerals or memorials was my way to honor them. These people made the ultimate sacrifice that I hope I will never have to make. And they deserve to be honored for that. It was just their fate that they chose to make a right instead of a left.